So the name for this talk on the schedule was Sidestepping the Uncanny Valley, Physical Asset Capture in Wonder Buffalo VR. I changed it up a little bit because I didn't want to go too deep into the technical side, and it sounded a little pretentious, so let's scratch that. Instead, we're going to go a little deeper. Finding our way in the metaverse, a step-by-step guide to finding technology that fits the content and not the other way around. And I know this is a technology conference, but as you'll see when I show this VR, AR emerging landscape that the VR Fund breaks down every quarter, it's a mess. It's a big, wide open world, and the technology is very much a moving target. So what I'm going to try to lay out for you today is a methodology that starts from the story and the content and allows you to realize what technology may service that the best. So to go a little bit deeper on the philosophical side, if anyone's a fan of Voices of VR, Kent Bai ends every podcast by asking, what is the ultimate potential of VR? And I think that that's something that binds everyone, not just in this room, but in this industry, because we all see where it's going, right? We all see that, the future is coming. It's just we can't quite fit all the pieces together. And so this is one of my favorite quotes from Neuromancer, or the Neuromancer author, William Gibson, but I have my own version of it in relation to Wonder Buffalo, which is just that it's not very evenly rendered, meaning we don't quite have the capabilities technologically to do everything that we know should theoretically be possible, like rendering an entire space as a digital light field and having full agency to walk around it as, we know would be the Matrix-like experience that we all want. So we skirt around it with some clever creative solves around the technical limitations. So with Wonder Buffalo specifically, the issue was more capturing certain components and putting them together into an interactive VR experience. So ultimately, the potential of VR is this metaverse that anyone can navigate and walk around, but we have a long way to go towards that. Especially, as this 2D web slowly becomes dimensionalized and we're creating landscapes that are connected through the internet. I think that the game engines do provide a path to a more seamless three-dimensional experience, but ultimately, the free and open distribution of the web is going to be a crucial step to mass adoption as opposed to installing individual apps. So we're going to try a little experiment today, if you can all bear with me. I want you to take off your headsets in 3, 2, 1. No, I'm just kidding. We're not there yet. Hold on, this cut out. Oh no, it shut down. Hold on one moment. Okay, so with all that in mind, that, clearly there will be a future where we won't have these big clunky headsets. We can get lost easily in this world of photons beamed directly to our retinas. Real-time rendering is almost indistinguishable from pre-rendered content so that it can be interactive. CG actors can create bespoke films that are personalized to us or that can interact with us in some meaningful way so that we can exert influence over the story. It's all coming, but it's not quite there yet. And so that was the challenge leveled to us in this grant from the studios to ETC, asking how can we capture physical assets today and bring them into a real-time rendered experience? Because, as cool as CG Arnold was, for the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a market for capturing the real actors, the real sets that are built, and pulling them into these really high-end VR experiences. So that brings us to the current VR landscape. It's a bit of a mess, and anyone but the most tech-savvy will have quite the time navigating this plethora of options and how they can all fit together to serve an individual story. So how do you get from that big landscape to this very finely honed workflow that we developed for Wonder Buffalo to bring the sets, the actors, and the CG objects all together in the same space? Essentially, we started with story, and we applied a methodology from the World Building Media Institute at USC, started by Alex McDowell around his work on Minority Report, where before there was even a script, they built out the world as it could be in 2050, and started with logical parameters and took those to their inevitable conclusions as they saw them, consulting with a bunch of futurists. This can be applied to any story to a lesser extent. When it came to Wonder Buffalo, we had a short film script, and we had a great resource in Christine, the director, for whom it was a very personal story. And so the VR development process really started with several long conversations around the key themes of this world, what inspired her to write the story, the message that she wanted an audience to walk away with by the time they came out of this experience. And so this is the result of that work. And as you can see, there were clusters around Thai culture, preserving the authenticity, but also conveying the message of body image and artistry. And that's kind of what we honed in on as the key aspects of the VR experience. But then the bigger question is, why VR at all? Beyond the mandates that the studios were interested in exploring it, what is allowed by VR that is not by other mediums? And, to explore that, I think we need to go to neuroscience a little bit, because VR can deepen empathy not only by tricking you that you're there, but once you're tricked that you're in a real environment, you start responding to physical stimuli in the way you would in real life. And I don't know how many of you have read about mirror neurons, but there are these pathways in our brain that essentially activate the same electric potential in these key neurons when we watch someone else perform an activity as when we do that activity ourselves. And so this is kind of the key to unlocking deeper senses of empathy and understanding in VR experiences, which is why many have called it the empathy machine. And here's a slide to prove that I didn't make that up. But essentially, that explained why VR, why it was important for this experience so that we could understand Anne's world and we could deepen the immersion to understand, the things that she experiences every day. Then we had to decide what was our role, the audience's role, going to be inside of this world. And this is also from Kent Bai's podcast, but he broke it down that there are really only 4 types of VR stories at the end of the day, which helps reduce the complexity and makes it a tractable problem that you can approach. Which type of story are we trying to tell? So you as a user can exert impact over the story, or you cannot. And you can be a character in the story that the world of the story acknowledges, or you cannot be. You can be a ghost. And talking through the implications of each of these scenarios with Christine, we ultimately decided that we wanted to give the user a sense of helplessness early on in the story. And so we started as a ghost without impact in this world, where you're forced to be a bystander and witness this verbal abuse that she goes through every day. But that in order to end it on an uplifting note, you would then transform midway through into a ghost with impact in the story. And that's a tough line to walk, to transition seamlessly from one form to another midway through an experience, especially when the user interface of every single VR experience is different right now. And so it's hard for people to know intuitively what to do when they go into it. So I don't know that we were 100% successful, but it was a big experiment, and you can form your own conclusions. So within Wonder Buffalo, once we built out that world, the key questions were 360 video versus interactive. We wanted to go interactive to show the studios how you could capture the actors. The actors can be captured through a few methods right now. One of them is through light stage technology, where you scan the actors' faces under all conceivable lighting scenarios, and you use that as a template to build really high-res 3D models. This obviously was a little bit out of scope for what we could accomplish on this project, but I do think it's a legitimate approach that if we were really to take on the issue of body dysmorphia head-on and make it as interactive an experience as possible where you truly feel embodied, this is probably the best approach to take. We settled for volumetric capture, which is still very cutting edge and in its infancy, but it is exciting technology because it allows you to bring the real actors into these experiences. And so, as opposed to some other techniques that we've seen applied, such as shooting actors in stereo and keeping them at a certain distance from the viewer inside of these 6 degrees of freedom experiences, I really think that, as the resolution improves and the technology matures, that this volumetric capture and these immersive 360 stages will become kind of the de facto capture point for live virtual theater that the user can walk around. And, what I was trying to get at with that lofty opening was that we all see this big, expansive metaverse that will be perfectly interactive and, allow us to go anywhere we want, spin up any experience we want on a whim. But for now, there are very real technical limitations, and working around those means taking individual pieces of these experiences, such as the actors, the environment, the objects in the scene, and treating them each as unique points of capture, so that ultimately in Wonder Buffalo, we used photogrammetry to build the environment, we used volumetric capture to bring the actors into that environment, and then we put CG objects and lit them so that they blended as seamlessly as possible into that environment and made parts of the experience interactive that you wouldn't normally expect to have control over. So that was our process with Wonder Buffalo. Happy to address any questions, but thanks for listening.